Hi everybody, I just wanted to go over this article really quickly for you, the one you did, the Peterson and Sweeney on asthma. First of all, you all did pretty darn good. I was impressed. Purpose of the study, there were two aspects of that study, so I'll go over that in a quick second. The null hypotheses and the alternative hypotheses. The one thing I want to mention is that, and I put it in your papers, you got to be succinct, okay? And we had to include both aspects for the purpose of the study, which most of you did, so that was good. The words you really want to stick with are association, relationship, difference. Don't use the word correlation unless you truly are doing a correlational study, because that is a specific statistical test, period. Power analysis was mentioned in there. Sample size, it was 228 families. So that's what they interviewed, and I can't remember, I think maybe some dropped out, I don't know, but it was still 228, the N was. And let me see here. So let me go over some things really quickly. I want this to be short. Okay, quantitative study. There may have been some confusion whether this was a qualitative or quantitative, because the word interviewing pops up here, okay? The thing you need to remember, though, is when you're looking at, well, first when we were looking at methods, let me go down here, methods. Cross-sectional design, that means it's a snapshot in time. That is pretty much that's a typical quantitative research design. And the other thing is, let me go here. They did talk about interviews over 16 months, but as you keep reading, their measures were tools, specific instruments. So they weren't interviews per se set up in the qualitative fashion where you have structured interviews. These were actual measures that they used, and then you can scroll right on down to the data, and this is multiple regression analysis. That's higher level statistical quantitative analysis. Okay, remember, with qualitative studies, your results are reported in themes. This is all statistical or all quantitative analysis, your p-value. So remember, quantitative is numbers, qualitative is words. Okay, so the purpose of this study, there were two aspects to this. So even though it talks about this study and it mentions here, asthma-related education received from child's healthcare providers measured by the parent report was hypothesized to influence parents' illness representations and parent healthcare provider relationships. So we know we had two purposes for this study right here. But isn't that clear? It wasn't really to me. What the heck were they doing? So you got to keep reading this. So they talk about education here. They talk about illness representation and belief systems. Use the words that they state, okay? And by the way, understand what they're saying. I had no idea what illness representation means, so I had to go on, and they talk about it's a framework and what it does, and I didn't even realize it was really a framework. So you have to definitely read the whole article to understand it. And then they talk about parent-provider relationships, okay? So we're talking about education and this illness representation of these parents and these provider relationships. So as we scroll down here, this is very clear, the purpose of the study reported here. We know this was from a larger study. It was to explore the impact. And I know I crossed that out on a lot of your guys' papers. That's what they wrote here. And by the way, direct quotes. Make sure you synthesize your own information. Don't use direct quotes. So even though they use impact, it's better for you to write relationship or difference or association. You need to get used to those terms, okay? So anyways, we hypothesized that the parents receiving more education would, number one, have a representation of their children's asthma. And that's okay, closer to professional role model. I don't even know what that means. That's why if you're going to write that, I would kind of reread this and synthesize that information, and they would report a more positive relationship. And that's all great and dandy, but think about being clear and succinct, okay? And I wrote purpose, I think I cut and pasted, or I wrote out how to write that on most of your guys' papers. Okay, so methods. Cross-sectional design. Right off the bat, we know that that's a quantitative design. It's a snapshot in time. That's all a cross-sectional is. We sit down, we get these scales done, and that's it. There is a limitation to those because you can't go on and monitor long-term effects, but that's okay. It's cheap and easy. It tells us we had 228 patients, or parents and children. Our power analysis was 200, and you guys all got that, so that was awesome. Here's our measures that they used, okay? So we know there was the, well, demographics. That's a measure, but it's, you know, whatever. We know they use this prayer thing. We know they use an illness representation scale, the AIRS. And then we know that they use this patient healthcare provider interaction, which this is kind of was hard for me to understand because it's a measurement or an instrument. They developed it with the larger project. It had a Cronbach's alpha of 0.2, and that's great. That remember they have to report that. Very important. Cronbach's alpha just tells you inter-rater reliability on each item, and the number has to be 0.7 or greater for something to for a scale to truly be reliable. It tells us that it was on a 5-point Likert scale, but I missed it. I don't see it. Or, you know, how many items were there? So what I wanted to say here is also reverse scoring. If you don't know what that means, just look it up. And all reverse scoring is that a lot of times questions will be more positively stated. So you go with the higher scores. Reverse scoring means that you state these negatively. So they go with the lower scores. Here's the reason this whole thing was invented, because some people were found to put like higher answers all the way through. They really kind of didn't read the scale, I guess. And so they started doing negatives or reverse scoring. But a long story short, nobody knows if it really matters. So there you have it. Okay, what I really wanted to talk to you about though was level of measurement. There were two questions. The first question was, hang on, the measurement of the parent healthcare provider interaction instrument have questions which involved an answer on 5-point Likert scale where 1 strongly agree and 5 strongly disagree. What's the level of measurement? Okay. The second question was the total score summation of the individual questions coded in 1 through 5 was also available for the measure parent healthcare provider action, and the total score is what level. Okay, so here's what I want you to walk away with. It would have, the answer maybe for this one would have been, let me see here, this first one. If you put ordinal, I was okay with that. And if you put interval, I'm definitely okay with that. But here's the thing. The question really should have asked you why. Why do you think that? This one, the second question is the total score summation of the individual questions coded, blah, blah, blah. The answer here would be interval, not ratio. I didn't take off points for this because I think this is a hard thing and I really want you to walk away knowing this, and it may be that you have to actually go out and look at some things on your own. So Google it. This is a great site right here, www.statisticalsolutions.com, data levels of measurement. Okay, so the debate out there, what I want you to know is statistics isn't perfect either. And that's why we have that probability where we always have to, that probability concept where you always have to take that into consideration because you just never know completely 100%, okay? So the question out with pure statisticians is a Likert scale. It's actually called Likert. That's the name of the guy. I just think it's a weird name. Is the Likert scale really interval level? Statisticians will say absolutely not. Some statisticians, though, may say, okay, well, 5-point definitely not, but 7-point you can consider that. I don't know where the 6-point, whatever. People just do this odd stuff, 5, 9, whatever. So, but here's the thing. Here's what I want you to know. For health sciences, pretty much it's going to be interval level. I know, and you're going to say, but there's no 0 point. But here's the deal. For example, if I have a 9-item, it's a 9-item question, and we call those 9-item scale. And the responses can be never, rarely, sometimes, often, and very often. So if I take 9 items and I multiply it by what I could get the highest, that's 45. That's a pretty darn high score. And most statisticians, not all, will tell you, you know what, that's fine. That is an interval level. But if it's really low, they're going to say, absolutely not. You can't. How can you measure accurate means off of those? And that's what we're doing. We're comparing means off of these scales, right? So they're going to tell you that this would be an interval level scale, okay? Now, because when you sum this up, these quoted questions in 1 through 5, and if you take this scale as an example, where I got 45, no matter what, when you sum a scale, it's going to be pretty much interval level. It's going to be interval level because you can measure the difference between a score of 45 and 44. I mean, you know that is that's a true distance, okay? That's a true distance. That's an interval. So when you're talking about the total score, summation of the individual questions, that's going to be interval level. So don't say ratio, it's interval level. Unless you have a true 0 point. And that's weird, I know. So, but this question, the measure of the parent-healthcare provider interaction, I gave it all to you, but what I want you to walk away with health sciences is that generally when you have these, and we didn't know what the score was this totally, or maybe we did and I missed that, but you're safe to say interval, okay? Now when you go on to get your doctorate of nursing practice and you're taking biostatistics, you're going to have a clear understanding of this to justify anything that you do or say, okay? So go out and do some research. Level of measurement is hard, and especially when you're talking about the Likert scales. And, okay, so I think that was all I had to say, and thanks for listening.